Hello, I'm Kaylee Whalen, an autistic transgender advocate, and I'm coming to you from Los Cuchumatanes, which are the mountains above Huehuetenango, Guatemala, where my grandmother is from, and where my Puerto Rican grandfather and Guatemalan grandmother retired. So, in this video, I'll be talking about my heritage as a Latinx American for Latinx Heritage Month. So please stay tuned, and thank you for joining me. So this is going to be the most personal vlog I've recorded. I am in El Cementerio General, the General Cemetery in Huehuetenango. This is the cemetery where my grandmother, Yolanda Saras, who's from Guatemala, and my grandfather, Federico Saras, who's from Puerto Rico, are buried, because they raised my mother in New York City and after retirement moved to Huehuetenango. I never got to attend my grandmother's funeral, which is a big reason I decided to come. I also never really got to know my grandfather well. And in many ways, I took after both of them, especially the fact that they were both very dedicated to social justice and were deeply empathetic people who cared about the local community here in Huehuetenango, including the Mayan indigenous community. And they were well loved. And since August 2nd, I've been in Guatemala. It's now about August 21st. And I've had so many friends of my grandparents show me around, introduce me to people. In fact, one of my grandmother's best friends, Silma, introduced me to the LGBTQ community here in Guatemala because my grandmother had always cared about the LGBT community and marginalized people. So I know I'm in a cemetery. One would hope it would be quiet, but there's a lot of noise. I'm right near the road. So please bear with me. And I am desperately searching for my grandparents' grave right now, which is one reason I'm so upset, because this is my third attempt to enter the cemetery since coming to Huehuetenango. The first day I tried, it was too late at night and it was closed. The second day I tried, it was supposed to be open, but unexpectedly was closed because of COVID. And today is open, but the person who was going to try to help me find my grandparents' grave couldn't make it. So I'm here. There's a lot of really beautiful graves here, including a lot of mausoleums is the word I was looking for. And in typical Guatemalan style, they are all very, very colorful. And I'm just going to walk a little bit to show you. Now, I know my grandfather and grandmother's grave is white. That is about all I know. And there's a lot of mausoleums to look for. So I'm going to keep searching, because this is one of the main reasons I came to Guatemala, to mourn and to honor my grandparents. So I'm not going to let kind of being in this maze of, mausoleums stop me. My grandmother was a fascinating person. She loved to party. She loved to drink, smoke cigarettes, loved to just go out and have a good time. I know it was actually a little difficult for her to move to Huehuetenango after living in New York because she's a very social, extroverted, outgoing person. And this is a very small town. But I know she made so many friends here. And the funny thing is, my friend Suma Valiente was one of my grandmother's first friends. And strangely enough, my grandmother, who was Catholic, was very, very progressive and, like I said, believed in LGBTQ rights, was a feminist, and she taught sex ed as a volunteer in local Catholic schools. And actually, her friend Zulma, she met because she taught a sex ed class at Zulma's school. And Zulma really kind of fell in love with my grandmother as like a mentor and kind of a parental figure. And Zulma's parents let my grandmother tutor Zulma in English, but also just Zulma would stay at my grandparents' house. She learned a lot from my grandmother. And Zulma, now owns her own business, and she's into like organic foods. And my grandmother also, really cared about the Mayan indigenous communities. She would attend Mayan religious festivals. She would get invited to Mayan villages. And my grandfather as well, he had trained as an engineer in the United States. And one thing that he did when he came to Guatemala is he designed his own house, the electricity, the plumbing, the architecture, the grounds, the gardens, the fruit orchards. He did all of that, and he hired local Mayan indigenous people to help him and paid them well. And after they moved here, my grandfather would always be tinkering around with mechanical things. It was always restless and loved tinkering and doing things. And one thing he did is he trained the local kind of workers to help them with their career in mechanical repair, auto repair, house repair, and would help them get a job. So it's now raining, which is pretty appropriate for a cemetery where I'm trying to mourn my grandparents. So I'm going to stop the video. And thank you for being on this journey with me, because it's been really important for me to kind of discover and learn about my family, where I come from. And during these last few weeks, I've talked with my grandmother's friends, Suma, Marina, others, and learned a lot. I also was in Puerto Rico 2 months ago and interviewed remaining surviving family of my grandfather, and I've learned a lot, which is why from all those interviews, I'm pretty sure he was autistic. He liked the quiet mountains of Huehuetenango, would kind of opt out of social situations after a short period of time or kind of avoid them, and really preferred being in his mechanic shop repairing things or playing chess or reading. And I've always been kind of compared to him most of my life. So I guess I'm kind of stimming with my hair, so bear with me. I'm just kind of nervous and anxious, so it's helping me. And I'm going to go try to find their grave. So the groundskeeper here at the Huehuetenango Cemetery did find my grandparents' grave. And it is behind me. Federico Saras and Yolanda Esteves Saras. The grave says Fred Saras, although his Puerto Rican family all called him Fico. And his full name was Federico, so I think it's funny that he's buried as Fred. I just knew him as my grandfather. And my grandmother's maiden name was Esteves. That is a, Guatemalan name. Now they are from Spanish origin, my grandmother was actually a bastard child, so we don't actually know 100% what her family lineage is. To be honest, I have been crying at their grave. I brought them some offerings. Luckily, there were some nice flowers here already. I was trying to find a flower seller near the cemetery, but I couldn't. So, my grandmother, Yolanda, taught me to cook Guatemalan food. I just brought some traditional tortillas de maíz, corn tortillas, which are here they're made by hand. My grandfather liked his ice cream, and I was saying he liked it melted and kind of stirred like this, so it's kind of soupy, which I think is kind of a sort of autistic texture thing to do. Yeah, I've learned autistic people have a lot of interesting food sensory aversions and sensory seeking, so I guess he liked soupy ice cream. So, yes, this is a very emotional moment for me. I did spend some time already without the camera rolling. But for me, I also really care about recording things. I'm used to kind of keeping a journal and a written blog, and I'm trying to learn how to properly kind of vlog. So, I don't want to be exploiting their memory, but I also wanted to share this story. I think it is important as a Latinx person to share a story about my heritage. And I'm largely invisible a lot of the time as Latinx. So telling that story is important. Telling the story about how my grandmother was an immigrant, an undocumented immigrant to New York City as a child, that she ended up, in Spanish Harlem, ended up doing okay for herself, doing odd jobs in New York City is where she met my grandfather, Federico. And he had come from the Puerto Rican island in a very kind of remote mountainous area near the center, so not in a kind of urban center, but from kind of a more poor working class area. And he had come to New York City to also seek work. He served in World War II. He was stationed in the Philippines, where he contracted malaria. And my grandfather and grandmother did raise my mother. She's been my closest parent. I've always much more felt connected to my Latinx side. My whole life I have been compared to my grandfather, but my grandmother also has meant a lot to me. She inspired me, taught me the kind of joy of cooking, told me to be proud of my Guatemalan heritage, encouraged me to learn Spanish, which I'm doing now. And I was very goth and alternative even before I came out as LGBTQ. And my parents kind of weren't into that. My grandmother loved my fashion. I inherited some very kind of gothic looking black and silver jewelry from her. And she loved my girlfriend's like corseted, gothic dress and my spiky gothy hair. And when I came out as trans, she was no question accepting. And my parents weren't at first, but she was. So she lived with us in the United States sometimes, because I didn't get to visit here that often. But she was in the United States when I was living in Washington, D.C. as a trans woman a year or so after coming out. And I remember she told me that to be proud and sorry. She told me to be proud and unapologetic for who I am. She told me that basically I shouldn't take shit for anybody for my identity, and that being trans wasn't hurting anyone, and if anyone gave me a problem, I shouldn't take their shit. That, I could tell them it's not hurting you, why do you care? My grandmother took a lot of shit. She was a very free spirit, which is hard for, someone born in 1929 to be kind of a feminist, somewhat kind of secular, free-thinking, progressive Catholic, to, of course, be an immigrant in the United States. She actually, and this is privileged and very difficult these days, but she actually got her citizenship. She was very proud to study hard for the citizenship test and to get her U.S. citizenship. But, she never forgot where she was from. And after my grandparents raised my mother in Queens, New York, and my grandfather retired from his job at an electroplating factory, they moved to Huehuetenango, which is the town I'm in now. And in Huehuetenango, they moved to kind of a very remote mountainous area that I'm actually going to go visit later today. And my grandfather, while in New York, had done research on architecture, and he'd gone to the botanical gardens in New York City to learn what kind of plants he could grow in the Guatemalan climate and soil. And he learned, to be an electrician and plumber, and he designed and built the entire house. And I'd always been so proud of him. And yet, I didn't get to attend his funeral. I didn't get to attend my grandmother's funeral. Guatemalan funerals are very quick. They hold the funeral and inter the body almost immediately. And when my grandmother died, especially, it was hard because the main reason I couldn't go was that I didn't have a passport. I would have had to renew it, and I hadn't because I was afraid of renewing my passport because of being transgender and all the stress around identity documents around being transgender. And I was recently in the process of changing everything over. But I just didn't have time to do so before my grandmother was interred here. So this is my way of honoring them. Today's the first day I've actually walked inside the grave. I've done a circuit around the cemetery about 4 times already, but not gone in, mostly because it's been locked. But I've also been trying to mentally prepare myself for this moment. I'm probably gonna visit the grave a few more times, and I guess it's just important for me to be proud of who I am and where I came from. You know, I'm a social justice, racial justice, disability justice advocate. My grandfather, Fred, was a labor organizer in his factory. My grandmother taught, sex ed in Catholic schools. Both were part of supporting activists and artists and people who are dedicated to kind of changing society. And I hope I just carry on that tradition. So, thank you for joining me. I'm gonna spend a little more quiet time here. And then I'm gonna go to their house. This is my first time in Guatemala in about 25 years, so it's been a very emotional journey coming here, but I'm glad I'm finally here, and I'm proud to share my story. And I'm proud to be Latinx and Guatemalan and Puerto Rican, and I'm just glad I found their grave. So this is it. I said I'd come see where my grandparents' house was, and all that seems to really be left is a garage. The property where it was is totally developed. Behind me used to be fruit trees. I remember I had a little model car, remote control car, and we would drive it around the fruit orchard, which was directly behind me that way. Now there's a whole development. My memories are about 25 years old, and it's just kind of disturbing to see. It's just abandoned. There's this concertina wire on this wall behind me, and this little shack kind of behind me is all that's really left. I saw some broken pipes and building materials on the ground, which I took some photos of, and that was kind of difficult to see because I know my grandfather built the house on this land from scratch, including doing the plumbing and electrician's work. So seeing my grandfather's plumbing and building materials just scattered around the ground was honestly kind of disturbing. And I remember, we could just roam around the trees here, and there were parrots. We had pet parrots. Sometimes they just go up in the trees. We had a lot of good memories here, and it's my only memories of my grandfather because I only saw him when I came to Guatemala when I was a kid. So today I decided to honor their memory by going to their grave and visiting their old house. And this is it. So thank you for being on this journey with me. And I hope this video educates you, maybe just lets you know me a little better, and you can learn more about my activism and what it's like being an autistic Latinx trans woman in my other videos, including a video I released the other week about interviewing local trans youth Guatemalan activists with Red Transhoven. But this is my story. This is where I came as a kid and experienced Guatemala and fell in love with the country that my grandmother was from. And way in the distance, you can see the mountains behind me. And I just remember looking out at those mountains. It was Christmas. You could see fireworks. and everyone's celebrating. So this was my community, this was my grandparents' community, and this is where I'm from. So thank you for joining me on this journey. And if you've liked my videos, take a moment to hit that like button. Hit subscribe to get notified of future videos. I release a video once every Friday, and I mix it up with some tips for autistic and trans folks, talking about travel and anxiety, and I'm doing a video about autistic meltdowns. And I also do videos interviewing trans and neurodivergent activists in other countries. So take a moment. If you got something out of this or had a story to share about your heritage, please leave a comment, give it a like, and for my videos coming out every Friday, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey here in Huehuetenango, Guatemala, and I'll see you soon.